Seoul, South Korea, the 90th floor of Handul Tower. The silence in the boardroom was heavy enough to crush bone. 12 men, titans of industry, politicians, movers of billions, sat around the obsidian table, sweating. They were afraid to breathe. They were afraid to look at the man standing at the head of the room, Min Sun-woo. He stood with his back to them, staring out the floor-to-ceiling glass at the sprawling neon nervous system of Seoul. He wore a three-piece suit cut from charcoal Italian wool that cost more than most men made in a year. His posture was military straight, his shoulders broad, emanating a lethal, coiled stillness. "You're telling me," Sun-woo said, his voice a low, smooth baritone that didn't require shouting to command terror, "that we lost the Incheon bid." He turned. His face was a masterpiece of cold, angular beauty. High cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes the color of a starless night. But they were dead eyes, glaciers. There was no light in them, only a terrifying, hollow competence. "Sir, the logistics," a heavy-set director stammered. "Get out," Sun-woo whispered. "Sir, you're fired. Leave your badge. Don't speak." Sun-woo didn't blink. "Get out before I bankrupt your entire lineage just to alleviate my boredom." The man scrambled out. The room was deathly quiet. Sun-woo checked his watch, a Patek Philippe that felt like a manacle. Meeting adjourned. As the room cleared, the heavy oak doors opened, and Choi Soo-min walked in. She was perfect. Porcelain skin, Chanel suit, the daughter of the Prime Minister. She was the woman he would marry in 48 hours. She walked up to him and placed a manicured hand on his chest. "You're tense, darling. The gala is the day after tomorrow. The press is already frenzied." Sun-woo looked down at her hand. He felt nothing. No spark, no irritation. Just the dull, gray static that had filled his head for 6 years. "It's just business, Soo-min," he said, stepping away to pour a whiskey. He needed the burn to feel alive. "You're still thinking about her," Soo-min said, her voice sharpening. "The American ghost." Sun-woo slammed the crystal glass onto the table. The sound cracked like a gunshot. He turned to her, and for a second, the monster beneath the suit rippled the surface. "Do not," he warned, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl, "speak of things you do not understand." He turned back to the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. Somewhere in the reflection, he didn't see Seoul. He saw a small apartment in Queens. He saw curly hair and warm skin. He saw the only thing he had ever loved, and the woman who had gutted him like a fish. "I hate you, Irene," he thought, drinking the whiskey. "I hate you for making me alive, and I hate you for leaving me dead." New York City, USA, 8:15 p.m. Brownstones, rain, and the smell of wet pavement. Irene juggled 3 grocery bags and her umbrella, struggling with the keys to her apartment. Her heart was light today. She'd gotten a promotion at the art gallery. She had bought Ji-hoon the robot dinosaur he'd been begging for. "Ji-hoon, Mama's home," she called out, pushing the door open with her hip. "I got the..." The words died in her throat. The apartment was dark, not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that screams. The lamp in the hallway was knocked over. Shattered ceramic spread across the hardwood floor. "Mrs. Gable?" Irene dropped the bags. Eggs cracked, oozing onto the floor. "Ji-hoon?" She ran into the living room. Mrs. Gable, the sweet elderly neighbor who watched him, was slumped on the sofa, unconscious, a dark bruise blooming on her temple. "Oh, God!" Irene checked her pulse, strong but slow. She was breathing. Irene spun around, panic clawing at her throat. "Ji-hoon!" She tore through the small apartment, the bathroom, empty, the kitchen, empty. She sprinted into his bedroom. The bed was unmade. His stuffed tiger lay on the floor, torn. He's gone. The world tilted on its axis. Her breath came in short, jagged gasps. She fell to her knees, clutching the tiger, a primal scream building in her chest. Ring! A cell phone, not hers. It was sitting on Ji-hoon's small desk, a burner phone. It vibrated against the wood, the sound buzzing like an angry hornet. Irene stared at it. Her blood turned to ice. She knew, with a mother's terrifying instinct, that the voice on the other end would end her life. She crawled over and answered it. Mommy? The small, trembling voice made Irene's knees give out. She collapsed against the desk, tears instantly blinding her. Ji-hoon, baby, I'm here. I'm here. Are you okay? Mommy, the men. They have masks. I want to go home. Enough. A deep, synthesized voice cut in. The sound was metallic, devoid of humanity. If you touch him, Irene snarled, the sorrow instantly replaced by a feral, murderous rage. If you hurt a single hair on his head, I will kill you. Do you hear me? The voice laughed. It was a dry, scratching sound. You are in no position to make threats, Irene. You thought you could hide the heir of Handul in a burrow in New York? You thought we wouldn't find Sunwoo's bastard? Irene stopped breathing. They knew. The secret she had guarded for 6 years, the secret she had left her husband to protect, it was out. What do you want? She whispered. I don't have money. We don't want money. We want the king. Irene closed her eyes. The engagement gala, the voice continued. The Shilla Hotel. 48 hours. You will go to Seoul. You will bring Min Sunwoo to the Incheon docks, warehouse 4, alone. He won't come, Irene choked out. He hates me. We're divorced. He doesn't know about the boy. Then you better be very convincing, the voice sneered, because if Sunwoo isn't at the docks by midnight on the night of the gala, we will send the boy back to you. In pieces. Click. The line went dead. Irene stared at the phone, her body shaking so hard her teeth chattered. They were using her son as bait to assassinate Sunwoo. The very thing she had left to prevent was happening, and now an innocent child was in the middle of the crossfire. She stood up. She wiped the tears from her face. The sadness evaporated, leaving only a cold, hard resolve. She wasn't Irene the gallery manager anymore. She was a mother, and she was going to burn Seoul to the ground to get her son back, 35,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean. The cabin of the plane was dark, most passengers asleep. Irene sat in seat 4A, staring out at the black void. She had maxed out 2 credit cards to get the last seat on the red-eye to Incheon. Her hands were gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles were white. She closed her eyes and saw him. Sunwoo. She remembered the last time she saw him. He had been sleeping, his harsh face softened by dreams. She had kissed his forehead, left the signed divorce papers on the nightstand, and walked out into the rain. She did it because the dossier in her bag proved that a sniper had been hired to take him out at his next public appearance because of his weakness for her. They called her his vulnerability, so she removed herself. She had saved his life by breaking his heart, but she had never stopped loving him. Not for a second. Every time she looked at Ji-hoon, at his dark eyes, his stubborn chin, she saw the man she left behind. Now she was flying back to him, not to kiss him, but to deliver him to his executioners. No, she thought, opening her eyes. The lights of South Korea were beginning to appear below, a sprawling galaxy of gold and white. I won't let him die, and I won't let them keep Ji-hoon. She touched the glass window. I'm coming, she whispered to the city that held her past and her future. The plane banked sharp left, descending toward the dragon's lair. Irene smoothed her skirt, hiding the tremor in her hands. She had no weapons. She had no backup. She only had the one thing Min Sun-woo could never resist, and the one thing that could destroy him: the truth. The Shilla Hotel, Dynasty Hall, 9:12 p.m. The ballroom was a diamond-studded suffocation. 400 of Asia's elite sipped vintage Krug, the air thick with the scent of lilies and old money. Sun-woo stood on the dais, his hand resting stiffly on Choi Soo-min's waist. A photographer knelt before them. "One more, Chairman. Look happy." Sun-woo didn't look happy. He looked like a statue carved from obsidian. He was checking the exit routes, a habit he couldn't break. Bang. The heavy double doors at the back of the hall didn't just open. They burst inward. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Security guards shouted, lunging at a figure that was fighting, actually fighting, to get in. "Let go of me." The scream was raw, American English, and terrified. Sun-woo froze. The world narrowed down to a pinprick. He knew that voice. It was the voice that haunted his sleep. He stepped off the dais, pushing past the photographer. "Stop!" The command cracked like a whip. The security guards froze, stepping back to reveal the intruder. It was Irene. She was a ruin. Her coat was soaked through, dripping muddy rainwater onto the pristine marble. Her hair was wild, plastered to her face. She was missing a shoe. She was trembling so violently she looked like she might shatter. But her eyes, those fierce, defiant eyes, locked onto his. The silence was absolute. You could hear the rain hammering against the windows outside. Sun-woo felt a physical blow to his chest. The hate he had nursed for 6 years rose up, hot and choking, warring with a sudden, agonizing relief that she was alive. He walked toward her. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, terrified of the look on his face. He stopped 2 feet away. He could smell the rain on her. He could smell her fear. "You have some nerve," Sun-woo whispered, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. 6 years? And you crashed my engagement looking like a beggar? Sun-woo. Her chest heaved. She reached out, grabbing the lapel of his tuxedo with a dirty hand. "Please, you have to listen." "Get her out!" Sun-woo snarled to the head of security, turning his back. "Throw her in the street." "They took him!" The scream ricocheted off the crystal chandeliers. Sun-woo stopped. He turned back slowly. Irene was on her knees now, the fight draining out of her, replaced by a mother's absolute despair. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the rain. "They took your son." The glass in Sun-woo's hand didn't fall. He crushed it. Shards sliced into his palm, blood dripping onto the floor, but he didn't blink. The room spun. Son. The word rewired his DNA in a microsecond. The timeline. The way she had looked the week she left. The nausea. The secrets. He crossed the distance in a blur of motion. He didn't care about the cameras. He didn't care about the scandal. He grabbed Irene by the arms and hauled her to her feet, his grip bruising. "What did you say?" he hissed, his face inches from hers. Ideally, he should have been furious, but his eyes were frantic, searching hers for the lie. "Ji-hoon," she sobbed, clutching his shirt, staining the white silk with his own blood. "His name is Ji-hoon. He's 5. The Shadow Syndicate. They took him from the apartment. They said if I didn't bring you to the docks..." She choked on the sob. "They're going to kill him, Sun-woo. They're going to kill our baby." Sun-woo looked into her eyes. He saw the terror. He saw the love. And he saw the truth. The monster inside him, the one he kept chained up in boardrooms, broke the leash. He released her and turned to his head of security, Chief Kang. Mobilize Alpha Team. Full lethal authorization. Get the helicopter to the roof. Now. Sun Woo! Choi Soo-min shrieked, rushing forward, her face flushed with humiliation. What are you doing? Who is this woman? We have a ceremony. Sun Woo looked at his fiancée as if she were a piece of furniture. The engagement is over, he said, his voice flat, deadly. Get out of my way. He ripped the bow tie from his neck and threw it on the floor. He took off his tuxedo jacket and draped it over Irene's shivering shoulders, pulling it tight. The gesture was possessive, final. He put a hand on the small of her back, his touch burning through her wet clothes, and propelled her toward the exit. Where is he? Sun Woo demanded, his voice low. Incheon, Warehouse 4, Irene whispered. Sun Woo's eyes went black. Then we are going to war. The Incheon Expressway, 9:48 p.m. The armored Maybach tore down the highway at 140 miles per hour, rain lashing against the windshield. Inside, the silence was suffocating. Sun Woo sat in the back with Irene. He was bandaging his bleeding hand with a silk handkerchief, his movements sharp and angry. He hadn't looked at her since they got in the car. Irene huddled in his jacket, watching the city blur past. She felt small. She felt guilty. Why didn't you tell me? The question was quiet, but it filled the car. Irene turned to him. In the strobing lights of the passing street lamps, he looked terrifying. Beautiful, but terrifying. Because they told me they would put a bullet in your head if I stayed, she said softly. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you, Sun Woo. I left to save you. Sun Woo's jaw tightened. He finished tying the knot on his hand and finally looked at her. His gaze dropped to her stomach, then back to her eyes. Is he mine? He needed to hear it. He needed to know that the boy he was about to kill for was his blood. Irene reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking. She swiped to the lock screen. A photo of Ji-hoon laughing in Central Park. She held it up. Sun Woo stared at the screen. The air left his lungs. The boy had his nose, his eyebrows, the exact shape of his mouth. It was like looking at a ghost of his own childhood, but happier. Look at him, Irene whispered, her voice cracking. Look at him and tell me he isn't. Sun Woo reached out, his trembling finger hovering over the screen, tracing the boy's face. A tear he didn't give permission to fall tracked down his cheek. Ji-hoon, he breathed, testing the name. He looked up at Irene. The anger was still there, but beneath it was a devastating layer of pain. You stole 5 years, he rasped. You stole his first steps, his first words. I kept him alive, she countered, tears spilling over. I kept you alive. Sun Woo stared at her for a long moment. Then he reached out and grabbed the back of her neck, pulling her forehead against his. It wasn't a kiss. It was a desperate grounding. We get him back, he vowed against her skin. And then, Irene, you're going to answer for every single day you kept him from me. Incheon Container Terminal, 10:15 p.m. The Maybach screeched to a halt behind a wall of shipping crates. Sun Woo didn't wait for security. He kicked the door open. He had discarded the vest of his suit. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the top, sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle. He took a suppressed pistol from Chief Kang. Stay here, he ordered Irene. No, she said, climbing out into the rain. Her eyes were hard. He's my son. I'm coming. Sun Woo looked at her. He saw the fire. He nodded once. Stay behind me. If I say run, you run. They moved into the maze of rusted metal. The warehouse loomed ahead, dim light spilling from the cracks. Sun Woo moved like a phantom, silent, lethal. He signaled his team to flank the perimeter. Inside the warehouse, 4 men stood guard. In the center, sitting on a chair under a single hanging bulb, was a small, terrifyingly still figure. Ji-hoon, seeing his son like that, snapped the last thread of Sun-woo's control. He didn't wait for the signal. He stepped out of the shadows, raising his weapon. 2 guards went down before they knew death was in the room. "Contact!" the leader screamed. Chaos erupted. Gunfire sparked off the metal crates. Sun-woo shoved Irene behind a pillar and advanced, firing with robotic precision. He wasn't a CEO anymore. He was a force of nature. A mercenary lunged from the side with a knife. Sun-woo didn't flinch. He caught the man's wrist, snapped it with a sickening crunch, and drove his knee into the man's skull. "Get to the boy!" he roared to his team. A bullet grazed Sun-woo's shoulder, tearing through the white shirt and spraying crimson. He didn't even stumble. He shot the gunman between the eyes. The leader of the kidnappers grabbed Ji-hoon, holding a gun to the boy's head. "Back off or he dies." The warehouse went silent. Sun-woo stood 10 feet away, blood soaking his left sleeve, his chest heaving. His gun was leveled at the man's head. "Let him go," Sun-woo said. His voice was dangerously calm. "Drop the gun, King!" the man shouted. Ji-hoon was crying now, soft, terrified whimpers. Sun-woo looked at his son. He locked eyes with the terrified boy. And in that split second, he communicated a promise. "I've got you." "Irene," Sun-woo said calmly, "tell him to cover his eyes." "Ji-hoon, close your eyes, baby!" Irene screamed from the pillar. The boy squeezed his eyes shut. Sun-woo didn't blink. He pulled the trigger. The shot was impossible. A millimeter of margin. The bullet went through the kidnapper's eye. The man collapsed backward, releasing the child. Silence rushed back into the warehouse, heavy and smelling of gunpowder. Irene was running before the body hit the floor. "Ji-hoon!" She fell to her knees, grabbing his wrists. The boy collapsed into her arms, wailing, "Mommy, Mommy!" Sun-woo stood frozen. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving him shaking. His shoulder burned, but he couldn't take his eyes off the huddle on the floor. Irene looked up, her face wet with rain and tears. She whispered something to Ji-hoon and pointed at Sun-woo. The boy sniffled, turning his head. He looked at the tall, bleeding man standing in the shadows. Sun-woo dropped his gun. He walked forward, his legs feeling like lead. He knelt down on the dirty concrete, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. He was face to face with his son. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. It was like looking in a mirror through time. Ji-hoon had the same dark, intense eyes. "Hi," Sun-woo whispered. His voice broke. The great king of Seoul, the man who terrified boardrooms, was trembling. Ji-hoon stared at him. "Are you the superhero?" Sun-woo let out a wet, choked laugh. Tears blurred his vision. No, I'm your appa." Ji-hoon hesitated, then reached out a small, hesitant hand to touch the blood on Sun-woo's shirt. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," Sun-woo choked out. He couldn't hold back anymore. He reached out and pulled both Irene and Ji-hoon into his arms. He buried his face in the boy's small neck, smelling the baby shampoo and rain. The weight of it crushed him. The years lost. The love found. He held them so tight his muscles shook. He kissed the top of Irene's head, then kissed his son's hair. "I've got you," Sun-woo sobbed, his mask completely gone. "I've got you. I'm never letting you go. Never." Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, but in the center of the warehouse, amidst the bodies and the blood, the family was finally whole. The penthouse, Gangnam District, 11:45 p.m. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse, a sprawling fortress of glass, steel, and Italian marble that floated above the city lights. It was beautiful, cold, and utterly impenetrable. Sun Wu ushered them in. His shoulder was bandaged, a stark white patch against his shirt, but he moved with a restless, prowling energy. He keyed a code into a panel on the wall. Heavy steel shutters descended over the floor-to-ceiling windows with a pneumatic hiss, sealing them off from the world. "The guest suite is down the hall for Ji-hoon," Sun Wu said, his voice clipped. "My personal medical team is on the way to check him over properly." Irene stood in the center of the living room, clutching her purse. She felt like an intruder in a museum. "Sun Wu, we can't stay here. Just get us a hotel. Once the police take my statement—" "Police?" Sun Wu turned, his laugh dark and humorless. "The police answer to me, and you aren't going to a hotel." He walked over to her, his hand extended. "Give me your bag." "What?" "Your bag, Irene." She hesitated, but the look in his eyes brooked no argument. She handed it to him. He opened it, rifling through the contents until he found what he was looking for: her passport and Ji-hoon's. He pocketed them. "That is illegal," Irene snapped, stepping forward. "Give them back." Sun Wu took a step closer, invading her space until she had to tilt her head back to look at him. He radiated heat and danger. "You disappeared for 6 years," he whispered, the words heavy with betrayal. "You took my child across an ocean and hid him. Do you really think I'm going to give you the means to run again?" "I'm not running. I don't believe you." He turned and walked toward the liquor cabinet. "You are on lockdown. No one leaves this floor. Welcome home, wife." 2 a.m. The penthouse was silent. Ji-hoon was finally asleep in the guest room, clutching a stuffed tiger and a new tablet Sun Wu had produced from thin air. Irene sat on the edge of the massive white sofa, staring at her hands. She was exhausted, her adrenaline crashing into a deep, aching fatigue. Sun Wu walked in. He had showered and changed into gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt. The domesticity of the outfit made him more dangerous, not less. It stripped away the CEO armor, leaving just the man. He handed her a glass of water and sat on the coffee table directly in front of her, forcing her to look at him. "Why?" One word. Simple. Devastating. Irene looked away. "I told you. To save you." "That's a slogan, Irene. I want the truth." He leaned in, his forearms resting on his knees. "I was the heir to the Handul group. I had bodyguards. I had resources. Why did you think you had to do it alone?" "Because the threat wasn't just physical," Irene cried out, the dam finally breaking. "It was me. I was the threat." She scrambled for her phone, which she had retrieved from her bag before he took it. She pulled up a file she had kept encrypted for 6 years. She shoved the screen at him. "Look at it." Sun Wu took the phone. It was a scanned copy of a dossier. Photos of him and Irene in the park, at dinner, sleeping in their old apartment, and superimposed over his head were crosshairs. "Read the text, Sun Wu." He read the Korean text at the bottom. "The prince is distracted. He is weak for the foreigner. As long as she is in his bed, his throat is exposed. Remove her, or we remove him." Sun Wu went still. "They sent that to me the morning I found out I was pregnant," Irene whispered, tears spilling over. "If I told you, you would have fought them. You would have burned everything down to keep me, and they would have put a bullet in your brain while you were distracted protecting me." She looked at him, her soul bared. "I made myself the villain so you could become the king. I broke my own heart to make sure yours kept beating." Sun Wu stared at the phone. The realization hit him like a physical blow. She hadn't abandoned him. She had sacrificed herself. She had walked into exile, pregnant and alone, to ensure he survived to sit on this throne. Sunwoo stood up so abruptly the coffee table rattled. He threw the phone onto the sofa. You should have told me, he roared, pacing the room. You didn't trust me. You decided for me. I decided for us. Irene stood up to meet him. And look, you're alive. You're the chairman. It worked. I didn't want the chair if it meant losing you. He crossed the space between them in 2 sharp strides. His hands closed around her arms, not gentle, not cruel either. Like he meant to rattle sense into her, to make her feel the years he'd swallowed. But the instant his palms met her skin, the anger didn't hold. It broke, not into softness, into something worse, something starving. He drove her back against the wall, too hard, too fast. Then immediately, like his body betrayed him, his hand slid up to shield her head from the impact. Irene! His voice was low, ragged, a sound scraped raw. He leaned close enough that she felt the heat of him. Do you have any idea, he said, each word like a blow, what it's been like? Her breath hitched. Sunwoo. To wake up every day, he went on, jaw tight, for 2,000 days, reaching for you and finding nothing. Her fingers tightened on his sleeves as if she could anchor him. I didn't. I hated you. The confession came out like a curse. He pressed his forehead briefly to the wall beside her head, as if he couldn't trust himself to look at her and keep standing. I hated you so much it felt like dying. He lifted his face and finally met her eyes. Whatever he saw there, shock, guilt, love, all of it tangled, snapped the last thread of his restraint. He kissed her. Not sweet, not careful. It was a collision. 6 years of unsaid words, the grief of empty mornings, the rage that had nowhere to go. Irene made a small sound of surprise, and then, as if her body recognized him before her mind could catch up, she held on. For one suspended second, the world narrowed to the pulse in her throat and the way his hands trembled where they steadied her. Rain and sandalwood clung to him. Home, unfair and impossible, rose in her chest like a tide. He pulled back just enough to breathe, his gaze dark, frantic, searching her face like he was trying to memorize it before someone tore it away again. Tell me to stop, he said, hoarse. It wasn't a threat. It was a plea he hated himself for needing. Irene swallowed. Her voice came out small. Don't leave me. Something in him flinched at that, like the words went straight through the armor and struck bone. He took her hand instead of taking anything else. His grip was firm, almost desperate, and he led her down the hallway like he was afraid if he loosened his hold, she'd vanish. At the master bedroom door, he stopped. The room waited beyond it. Quiet, private, too final. He stood in the threshold, still holding her hand, breathing hard like he'd just run miles. His eyes dropped to her mouth, then lifted to her face again, and his expression shifted. Torture. Fear. A flash of the dossier rose in his mind like a slap. Weak for the foreigner. A warning dressed as truth. A weapon someone would gladly use. And then a worse thought. If he crossed that line right now, while everything in him was bleeding, he wouldn't know how to step back. He wouldn't trust himself to be gentle. He wouldn't trust the world not to punish her for what he felt. He let go. It looked like it hurt. I can't, he rasped, retreating a step as if the air in the room burned. He dragged a hand through his hair, eyes squeezed shut for half a heartbeat. Not like this. Sunwoo? Irene whispered, confused, reaching for him again. He shook his head. A rough, miserable sound caught in his throat. Not when I'm like this. His voice broke on the last word. Not when I want to break something and the only thing in front of me is you." He stared at her, really stared, like he was forcing himself to choose the harder kind of love. "Go to sleep," he said, the command softening only because it was for her, and locked the door. Then he turned before she could answer, before she could stop him, and strode out into the dark, leaving her standing in the doorway with her heart pounding, her mouth still warm with his grief, and the echo of him everywhere. The next morning, 8:30 a.m. Irene woke up to the smell of burning toast. She walked out into the living room, wrapping a robe around herself. She stopped dead in her tracks. The sleek, minimalist living room looked like a toy store had exploded. There were boxes everywhere. A limited edition motorized Porsche for kids, a drone the size of a hawk, a Lego set of the Death Star that had 4,000 pieces, a robotic dog that did backflips, and in the middle of it all sat Sunwoo. The terrifying CEO was sitting cross-legged on the floor, wearing pajama bottoms and a tight t-shirt, struggling to read the instruction manual for a transformer. Ji-hoon was sitting opposite him, holding a piece of plastic, looking skeptical. "It says, insert tab A into slot B," Sunwoo muttered, frowning deeply. "This diagram is illogical." "You're holding it upside down," Ji-hoon pointed out. Sunwoo paused. He flipped the manual. "Right. I knew that. I was testing your spatial awareness." Irene leaned against the doorframe, a small smile touching her lips. The burning smell was coming from the kitchen, where a plate of blackened eggs sat on the counter. Evidence of a failed attempt at breakfast before the toys. "Here," Sunwoo said, finally clicking the piece into place. He handed the robot to Ji-hoon. "Optimus Prime is operational." Ji-hoon took it, his eyes wide. He zoomed it through the air. Then he stopped and looked at Sunwoo. The room went quiet. "Hey," Ji-hoon said softly. Sunwoo froze. "Yes?" "Mommy said you were away working, that you were a king." Ji-hoon tilted his head. "Are you my daddy?" Sunwoo looked at the boy. The man who had negotiated billion-dollar mergers without blinking looked like he was about to shatter. Sunwoo swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He reached out and awkwardly patted Ji-hoon's head, his hand lingering there. "Yes," Sunwoo whispered, his voice thick with tears he refused to shed. "I'm your daddy, Ji-hoon, and I'm sorry I was late." Ji-hoon smiled, a bright, toothy grin, and launched the robot at Sunwoo's chest. "It's okay. You can be the bad guy now." Sunwoo caught the robot, a genuine, soft laugh escaping him. Irene watched from the doorway, her heart squeezing painfully in her chest. She saw the way Sunwoo looked at him, with awe, with terror, with absolute devotion. She realized then that her plan to leave was dead. She couldn't take this away from them. The walls of the fortress weren't just to keep the world out. They were starting to feel like the only place she belonged. The Choi family estate, Seoul, 11 a.m. Choi Soo-min stood by the grand windows of her father's estate, clutching a chilled glass of white wine. Her face was pale with fury, her perfect features twisted into a mask of cold venom. She watched the headlines scroll across the news channel on the massive flat screen. Han Dole chairman cancels engagement. Mystery woman and child emerge. The humiliation burned like acid in her throat. Sunwoo had discarded her in front of the entire world. And for that woman, the American ghost. "They won't get away with this," she hissed, her voice trembling. Her father, Prime Minister Choi, sat grim-faced across from her. The syndicate is still circling. They wanted Sunwoo gone. This family he suddenly claimed makes him vulnerable. Soo-min's eyes lit up with a dangerous glint. Vulnerable. A weakness. She remembered overhearing her father's hushed phone calls, fragments of conversation about the Shadow Syndicate's network. She knew they wanted Sunwoo, and now she knew his Achilles heel. She picked up her private phone, a secure, untraceable line. She had connections, whispers from the underbelly she wouldn't normally touch. But now, all bets were off. She found the number she'd been given months ago, a contact for a man known only as Ghost. Click, ring. "I have information," Sumin said, her voice icy calm. "The king has a new vulnerability. He has brought the American woman and her child to his penthouse, Min Sun Woo's private residence, 90th floor, Hondul Tower, and tonight he will be leaving them unprotected." She paused, listening, a low chuckle on the other end. "Consider it done, Miss Choi," the voice purred. "A debt will be owed." Sumin hung up, a chilling smile spreading across her lips. The world might think her humiliated, but she would have the last laugh. Sunwoo had destroyed her future. She would destroy his family. The penthouse, Hondul Tower, 7 p.m. Sunwoo was furious. A fabricated crisis at one of his shipping yards. A deliberate diversion. He had to leave. "Stay inside. No one comes in or out," Sunwoo ordered Chief Kang, who stood by the elevator. "Triple perimeter. My family's safety is paramount." He kissed Ji-hoon's head, then turned to Irene, his expression conflicted. "I don't like leaving you." "We'll be fine," Irene said, trying to reassure him, though a knot of unease tightened in her stomach. His vulnerability to her and her son was something she couldn't ignore. He pulled her close, kissing her deeply, possessively, a silent promise. "I'll be back as soon as I can." He left. The penthouse felt suddenly vast, empty, and exposed. Irene tried to read to Ji-hoon, but her eyes kept flicking to the fortified windows, to the heavy security doors. The quiet felt ominous. Thump. A faint sound from the service entrance. Irene froze. Chief Kang was downstairs. No one should be on this floor. "Ji-hoon," she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "We're going to play a game. A very important game." She grabbed his hand. "Remember the special room Appa showed you? The one with the strong door?" Ji-hoon nodded, his eyes wide. Another thump, closer this time, a metallic scraping. "Run, baby," Irene urged, pushing him toward the panic room, a hidden, reinforced vault disguised as a closet. "Go in there and don't come out until I say so. Don't make a sound." Ji-hoon, sensing her terror, didn't argue. He scrambled into the dark, secret room. The main security door burst inward, splintering wood and metal. 2 figures in black, masked and armed, stormed in. They were not common thugs. They moved with deadly precision. Irene didn't scream. She grabbed the heaviest object she could find, a bronze sculpture of a galloping horse. "Where is the boy?" one of them growled, his voice distorted. Irene didn't answer. She swung. Incheon Expressway, 7:45 p.m. Sunwoo received the call from Chief Kang. "Sir, the security feed to the penthouse just went dark. No one is answering." Sunwoo slammed his fist on the dashboard, shattering it. "It was a diversion. Get the helicopter to me now. I'm going back." His Maybach screamed a U-turn across 3 lanes of traffic, narrowly avoiding a collision. He left a trail of furious horns and screaming tires. The penthouse, Hondul Tower, 7:55 p.m. Sunwoo burst out of the elevator, gun drawn, his face a mask of primal fury. The penthouse was a battlefield. Furniture was overturned. Glass lay shattered. A heavy marble lamp was broken. "Irene!" he roared, his voice tearing through the silent destruction. He found her in the living room. She was slumped against a wall, a trickle of blood running from her temple. Her arm was twisted at an unnatural angle. One of the masked attackers lay unconscious at her feet, a grotesque dent in his skull, the bronze horse sculpture lying beside him. She was barely conscious, but her eyes were open, fixed on the panic room. "Ji-hoon," she rasped, her voice hoarse, pointing weakly. "He's safe." Sunwoo dropped his gun and ran to her. He knelt, cradling her face in his hands. "Irene, look at me," he pleaded, panic seizing his chest. "Irene." "He's safe," she whispered again, a faint, defiant smile on her lips. "I kept him safe." He saw the raw, protective fire in her eyes, even as consciousness faded. She hadn't run. She had stayed. She had fought. For him. For their son. She had faced down assassins with a statue, bleeding and broken, and protected his heir. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her hair, his own body shaking. "You crazy woman," he choked out, hot tears blurring his vision. "My God, you crazy, beautiful woman." He heard Ji-hoon's timid voice from the panic room. "Mommy? Appa?" Sunwoo held Irene tighter, then looked at the hidden door. "Ji-hoon, it's Appa. You can come out now." Ji-hoon emerged, blinking in the dim light. He saw the damage, the unconscious man, and his mother in Sunwoo's arms. He ran to them, burying his face in Sunwoo's side. Sunwoo held his son with one arm, his other wrapped around Irene. He looked at the wreckage of his home, at the proof of her sacrifice. In that moment, he realized that money and power were meaningless without her, without them. He would burn down Seoul if it meant keeping them safe. Seoul National University Hospital, 10:30 p.m. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled Irene's nostrils. She blinked, her head throbbing. Her arm was in a cast, and a bandage covered a gash on her temple. Sunwoo was sitting beside her bed, his head bowed, his uninjured hand gripping hers. He hadn't left her side. His own shoulder was rebandaged, his face haggard with exhaustion. Ji-hoon was watched by a Handul security guard. Irene stirred. Sunwoo's head snapped up, his eyes instantly on her. "Irene," he whispered, his voice hoarse. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her bruised knuckles. "Are you in pain?" "A little," she managed, a weak smile. "Ji-hoon?" "He's fine, scared, but safe, because of you." He squeezed her hand, his gaze intense, worshipping. "You were incredible. You fought them." "He's my son," she said simply. "What else was I going to do?" He stared at her, then climbed onto the hospital bed, carefully, gently. He lay beside her, spooning her, his head resting by her shoulder, his good arm wrapped around her waist. "I can't lose you again," he whispered into her hair, his voice raw with emotion. "I can't. I spent 6 years thinking you abandoned me. I was dead inside." Irene turned in his arms, wincing slightly with her injured arm, but she met his gaze. The mask was completely gone. He was raw, vulnerable, completely hers. "I never left you," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "Not really." He leaned in, his lips hovering over hers. This was not the angry, desperate kiss from the other night. This was tender. This was a promise. This was a man recognizing his soulmate. "My queen," he breathed and kissed her. The kiss was slow, worshipful, healing. It tasted of salt and regret and infinite blossoming love. She felt the depth of his devotion in every touch, every gentle movement. It was a reaffirmation of their bond, a testament to survival, and the quiet promise of a future they had both been denied. "You are never leaving me again, Irene," he vowed, his voice husky with emotion. "Not now. Not ever." Handul Tower, War Room, 6 a.m. The sun hadn't even crested the Seoul skyline when Sun Woo began the slaughter. He didn't use guns this time. He used algorithms, debt call-ins, and the terrifying weight of his global treasury. He sat at the head of a bank of monitors, his face cold and merciless. He looked like a god of ruin. "The Choi Group's offshore holdings?" Sun Woo asked, his voice a jagged blade. "Liquidated, sir," Chief Kang replied, tapping a tablet. "Their stock is in free fall. They'll be bankrupt by noon." Sun Woo didn't blink. Choi Soo-min's father had used his political power to shield the syndicate. Now Sun Woo was stripping him of every cent and every ounce of influence. By 9 a.m., the Prime Minister was being hauled into a police station for questioning regarding the syndicate's bribery. As for the Shadow Syndicate itself, Sun Woo had leaked their encrypted server locations to every intelligence agency, from Interpol to the CIA. Within 3 hours, the organization that had haunted Irene's nightmares for 6 years was being systematically dismantled in raids across 3 continents. "I promised to burn the world for her," Sun Woo whispered, watching the graphs on the screen turn red. "This is just the tinder." The Handul Grand Ballroom, 2 p.m. The press conference was the most watched media event in South Korean history. 500 journalists packed the room, cameras humming like a hornet's nest. The world expected an apology, a formal resignation for the disgrace of the gala. The side door opened. Sun Woo walked out, but he wasn't alone. He was dressed in a suit of midnight blue, his hand firmly entwined with Irene's. She looked breathtaking, regal in a cream silk gown, her curls pinned back with diamonds. Between them walked Ji-hoon, small but proud in a miniature tuxedo, holding his father's hand. The flashes were blinding. The noise was a roar. Sun Woo stepped to the podium. He didn't look at the teleprompter. He looked directly into the lenses of the cameras. "6 years ago, my wife, Irene, disappeared," he began, his voice echoing with a power that demanded silence. "The world believed we were divorced. My enemies believed I was vulnerable." He paused, looking down at Irene with a look of such raw public devotion that it made the journalist gasp. "The truth is," Sun Woo continued, pulling a weathered, yellowed envelope from his pocket, "I never filed the papers. I kept them in my desk for 2,000 days, waiting for her to come home." He ripped the divorce papers in half, the sound amplified by the microphone. "Irene is not my mystery woman. She is the chairman's wife. She is the mother of the Handul heir." And from this moment forward, his eyes turned to ice as he addressed his remaining rivals. "Anyone who dares to look at them with ill intent will find themselves facing the full, unmitigated wrath of this empire. The king is home, and he is not alone." The penthouse. Midnight. The city lights twinkled like fallen stars below them. The penthouse was finally quiet. Ji-hoon was asleep in his room, safe behind doors of reinforced steel and the love of a father who would kill for him. Sun Woo stood on the balcony, the wind ruffling his hair. Irene stepped out, joining him. She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady, powerful beat of his heart. "You really kept them," she whispered. "The papers?" Sun Woo turned, pulling her into the heat of his arms. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath hitch. "I couldn't sign them," he confessed, his thumb tracing her lower lip. "Every time I tried, my hand wouldn't move. Deep down, my soul knew you were still mine. I just didn't know why you had to go." He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "I am not the boy you left, Irene. That boy was a prince who needed a shield. I am a man now. I am the man who will burn the world to keep you warm. You will never have to run again. You will never have to be the shield." "I love you, Sun Woo," she breathed, her hand sliding into his hair. "I love you more than my own life," he replied, and his kiss was a vow. unbreakable, eternal, and fiercely possessive. 1 year later. The Han private estate, Jeju Island. The soft sound of waves hitting the shore was the only noise in the private cove. Irene sat on a lounge chair, glowing. She was 7 months pregnant, her hand resting on the swell of her belly. Beside her, Ji-hoon, now a confident 6-year-old, was showing his appa how to build a sandcastle. Sun-woo, the man who ruled the Asian markets with an iron fist, was currently on his knees in the sand, covered in salt water, meticulously sculpting a turret. He looked up, catching Irene's eye. He stood and walked over to her, the sunlight catching the gold of his wedding ring. He leaned down and kissed her deeply, his hand lingering on her stomach, feeling the kick of their second child. "Are you happy, my queen?" he asked, his voice low and rich with contentment. Irene looked at her son, then at the man who had become her fortress. The fear of the past was a fading shadow. They were the most powerful couple in the country, untouchable, obsessed, and finally, truly free. "I'm home," she said, pulling him down for another kiss. The king smiled. He had everything he wanted, and he would never, ever let it go. The end.